What's going on, guys? Jeff Van here, Plymouth on the screen, and Tennant is my Plymouth commander. We're going to talk about the Plymouth a little bit here. Key points here: number one, it's very strong at Tier 7. I don't expect the ship to stay at Tier 7. Note the caveats: once you started getting the premium ships now, they come with a disclaimer basically saying that they can be adjusted from what you get them at. So I expect this ship to stay as is and just move up to Tier 8. And I'll explain why I believe that is going to ultimately be the case. I don't think necessarily the ship is too strong, quote unquote. For Tier 7, I think it's a very powerful premium ship, yes, but I think if it was average people and a lot of just regular people playing this ship, I think that you'd see a very strong Tier 7. I don't think you'd see necessarily an overpowered Tier 7. I think this thing's going to get bumped because ultimately, the people who play the line, the British cruiser line, both the light and the heavies, are usually a little more skilled players, and I'll explain that in a little more detail as well. So ultimately, I think this thing's going to end up getting the Amagi treatment, which basically is Amagi. I don't think at the time that it was nerfed was overpowered, but yet it still got a nerf because of they went off the data that said that it was extremely powerful. Well, Magi had a high skill requirement threshold, so the people who usually played it were the one played it regularly, were people who were actually pretty decent at the game. So obviously the stats are going to look a little inflated in that sense. So I think that this may suffer from the same fate. I've seen this thing get absolutely torn apart. Plenty of games out there, and it's not necessarily overpowered in my opinion. I think it's a very powerful ship if you get into a good position, if you know the map and you're staying aware of who's looking at you and along those lines, and basically protecting yourself and not basically giving flat broadside, etc. So if you do those things, yeah, you can be pretty dangerous and you can have a very good game. Note that I did not choose the smoke build. If I went with the smoke build, I would have gone with Tier Whip, who basically gives Smogathon, and you also get some other cool perks with that, which is the radio indicator that basically shows where the closest enemy ship is, so you can go destroyer hunting with that pretty well. But again, we're going to talk a little bit more about why I went Tennant here. I think that the radar in this game, especially for this ship, is fantastic. 9.9 kilometer distance, and it's 40 seconds. So, I mean, what more do you need for a radar than that? I mean, it's absolutely extremely powerful. The ship with the rudder is like 3.5 seconds, which isn't great, but it's not bad. I mean, you can definitely take up a kiting defensive position and definitely shift that rudder back and forth to get some shells to miss. Note the fact that I have the turret traverse on it for slot 1, so that's going to increase the reload slightly, but it also is going to drastically cut down on my turret traverse time, so I'm going to get those guns on target. To me, I've always talked about this trade-off. If I can get the guns around, i.e. the rear turrets, right, around to the target faster, than I can deal with the extra, half second or so reload, because I'm going to be getting 6 more barrels, or in this case 8 more barrels on target. So that's just my opinion on that, and I know that a lot of people may disagree with me, but to me, if I can get guns on the target and still be active in my defense, i.e. shifting my rudder, etc., I think that in the long run is going to end up being more valuable. So you see Atlanta goes down there, and then you saw we were chunking that guy. We're up to 21,000 damage early on here in the match, and you're seeing the standard pens that this British AP and the damage that this thing can do. You're going to see this thing up close and personal when we get into brawling situations. A lot of people would say that this cruiser is not a very good brawler, but you're going to see otherwise when it engages enemy cruisers. 4 heals on this thing with the fully packed perks, so you do have some survivability. It's a standard heal, nothing too crazy, so don't be thinking that you're going to get a some super crazy Edinburgh heal. Excuse me. You're not. It's a standard heal for a Tier 7 cruiser, so just be mindful of that. And you're going to have a sonar, which is also helpful. and that radar sonar combo, you're definitely going to be effective when you're taking on enemy ships. Now, I briefly touched on the point of why I think this thing is basically going to be taken as is and put to tier 8. Typically, you don't see a lot of the British light, or for that matter, heavy cruisers out on the high seas in the wild, as it's known. But the reason why I think you don't is because they're very high difficulty ships. They're very high ceiling, very low floor ships. In other words, if you play them really well, you can really have an effective game and you can really be effective with your team. And if you're not a very good player with them and you just kind of fling them out there, you're going to get absolutely punished, because these ships are basically made to where if you are caught with a broadside, if you're caught out in the open, you are going to pay the price for those mistakes. You see Suzuya, we're getting some good chunk damage there. Got him with a Citadel. Ooh, got him with another Citadel. That's half his health. Let's see, can we go for the rest of it? Gonna throw another salvo out, and oh, yep, there we go, another triple Citadel. So that's 5 Citadels in a matter of 3 salvos. So about 20 seconds, his whole health pool disappeared and went to me. So again, when you get somebody broadside in this thing, you can absolutely delete them, and especially if they're an enemy cruiser. So again, high difficulty, very high ceiling, and very low floor on these. So when Wargaming looks to balance or buff or nerf a ship, they look at the basically the total stats that surround the ship. In other words, they say, all right, well, the standard XP that's being generated is this, and the average damage per game is this, and they basically take those all into account. Well, if a specific ship is played that has a high threshold of difficulty is played by a lot of very good players, of course that ship's going to look very, very powerful. Not necessarily is overpowered, it just is the way that the ship, those who play that ship are at the game. So a perfect example would be Amagi. Amagi, before the nerf, had no reason to be nerfed. There was no reason to nerf Amagi, but again, it's a high threshold difficulty ship, and so a lot of very good, high-skilled players played that ship. And so it looked as though on paper that it was overpowered, but if you just played that ship after playing, say, Iowa, or, well, not Vanguard, because everything seems powerful compared to Vanguard. Oh, and devastating strike there. Plymouth torpedoes are a threat. Watch out for them. And, oh, what's that? Another double strike. Okay. Well, so you're seeing where this game's going. Pretty good game here in the Plymouth. Definitely showing off the guns, showing off the torpedoes, showing off the ability to get up close and brawl if you need to, showing the heel, all that good stuff. So pretty good showcasing of what the Plymouth is here so far. So back to what my rough point was about Amagi. That ship really was very balanced. I think a strong contender at Tier 7, but not overpowered in my opinion, and got a pretty substantial nerf to where it was dropped to the lower half of what I think Tier 7 battleships are. So I think you're going to see that with Plymouth. I just think they're going to move it to Tier 8 as is, and it's going to be not completely overclassed, but it's going to be on the lower half of the Tier 8 cruisers once you start getting a good population of them. And that's simply, in my opinion, just because of the way that the ship is played and who's going to be playing this ship. I think you're going to see a lot of high-skilled players take this ship out. And you see that with a lot of the light cruisers. You see a lot of very skilled cruiser players end up taking out those British heavies and those British lights, and kind of skew those numbers, because some of those are, in my opinion, underwhelming, but are played very well by the player base, or I should say the player base that does take them out. So it kind of keeps them at the status quo. So I think that Plymouth, like I said, is just going to be moved up a tier. I think that the only balancing feature that they may do to it, just to kind of give it a little bit of a boost, would be they drop the reload by maybe quarter second or up to a half a second, or they just outright reduce one heal and give it a super heal. I could see both those being options in the future for it. But if you're thinking about going after the Plymouth, I think it's a very good ship if you like the British light cruiser line. To me, the British light cruiser line is one of my favorite lines in the whole game. This is the old update. New update is out by now. And so the Perth is coming out as the Halloween event. I can't wait to get that, which is basically a Tier 5 premium version of a Leander with a little bit of a twist on it. little Aussie twist. So very excited to try that out. It's the only ship in the update that I really care about. So very excited to see what that one has to offer and bring. And I cannot wait to see that one in action. So again, I'm a sucker for the British line. I love these light cruisers, AP only. So I think that if you're serious about picking this ship up and making it a priority of going after, I think that you have to know what you're getting into. I would strongly suggest you play through the British light cruiser line and basically see if you like Fiji. If you like Fiji, imagine a Fiji on steroids. It's a little more fragile because the guns that are going to be shooting at you are a little more accurate, hit a little harder, and you're going to have basically a Fiji on steroids here. So that's the best way I can describe it. So if you like that ship, give this one a like, give this one a look. So pretty decent game here in Plymouth. Again, all in all, I think it's a great ship. If you guys like the video, leave it a like. We'll see you guys out on the high seas. Take care.